Hello, you out there in YouTube land. This is Translator10 and I'm back with another action figure review. For those of you who jumped on the DC Collectibles bandwagon, you should pretty much know that those figures that the DC Comics Collectibles branch is churning out is nothing short of amazing. And besides a few paint flubs here and there and some questionable design choices, most of which are stemming from the New 52, each figure has been quite impressive, very critically and, fan praised. But let's take a look back at some of DC Direct's earliest offerings and see if some of those earlier figures have stood the test of time. And what I have with me today is the very first Green Lantern, Alan Scott, released by DC Direct in 2000 or 2001 under the Golden Age series of figures. Now these figures came out, as I said, about mid-2001, and this one in particular was extremely hard to find. And I just have to say that I was really lucky to get this figure when it first came out. And it wasn't even the figure that I wanted. I actually wanted the Hard Traveling Heroes Hal Jordan Green Lantern based off of Neil Adams' iconic design. And I actually have reviewed that as one of my very earliest figure reviews. So you can check that out if you want. Now, like I said, I really wanted that figure. And I remember at my local comic shop, because that's how you ordered those figures back then. They didn't offer online sales or anything like that. You wanted one of these figures, you either ordered it at a previews magazine or you ordered it straight from your local comic shop, The Source. And I said I wanted the Green Lantern figure. Well, had no idea that this thing was coming out, so they just put in an order for the Alan Scott Green Lantern. And I remember walking up to my local comic book shop, they told me my order came in, walked up, and I saw this guy. I'm thinking, this isn't the Green Lantern that I wanted. I don't even know who the heck this guy is. Now, I was just getting into Green Lantern by the time that, in the early 2000s. Kyle Rayner was my man. And Hal Jordan, I've had a couple of his Silver Age comic books that belonged to my dad. But I'd never heard of this guy. So, I actually thought he looked kind of neat. So, you know what? I went ahead and I took him. Why not? And after a couple of weeks of, scrubbing toilets and washing dishes and doing yard work and everything like that, I finally made enough in my allowance that I was able to finally, take him out of the package, and so what? Package is gone. I don't have the package for it anymore, but if I can remember correctly, it was very bland. The packaging, DC Direct, never really had any imagination. It's basically just a bunch of collective figures. But I've gone on and on and on about that. Let's take a look at Alan Scott. Now, Alan Scott is Earth's very first Green Lantern. He was a railroad engineer, and due to some shady dealings with some mobsters, they basically blew up the train that he was working on. And luckily for a glowing Green Lantern, it saved his life. Gave him the power of the Green Lantern, made him fashion a ring, and he designed himself a little costume to fight crime. Unlike the Silver Age and Modern Age Green Lanterns, Alan Scott was not a member of the Green Lantern Corps. In fact, they don't even really recognize him as a member. They kind of recognize him as an honorary member. But since this is the Golden Age, before they did the whole universe expanding thing, it was really cool to just have a guy that could fly, shoot green constructs from his ring, and just look really cool in a very flamboyant looking outfit. And what an outfit this is. You would not look at this and think of anything Green Lantern. That's the thing that I really like about Alan Scott. He doesn't have that Green Lantern Corps uniform with the green, tunic, the gray bodysuit, and the green boots and white gloves, and the domino green mask. This guy pretty much just made up his costume on the fly. He got himself, most likely, a unitard with one of those swashbuckler shirts, swashbuckler boots, and just fashioned himself a cape. And that's his costume. And I really do like the look of his costume. He really does have the look of one of those really colonial type swashbucklers, something coming out of Arabian Nights. And according to legend, Alan Scott's name was originally supposed to be Alan Did, and it was supposed to be an anagram of Aladdin, you know, and his little magic lamp. But for some reason they decided not to, and he became known as Alan Scott. Now, I think DC has refuted those rumors, and that is nothing more than a rumor, but it's still a nice little legend and little story people like to talk about. The colors really do accentuate the uniform. I really do love the color scheme. You have the really bright, almost neon green on the inside lining of his cape, the purple outside, and all of this really does match the costume. None of the colors ever clash, but they complement each other. The sculpt is, like, very faithful to the Golden Age. It isn't over-muscular. It isn't overly defined. They're very nice sculpts. As you can see, the head sculpt, a little cartoony, but once again, they're supposed to represent Golden Age characters, and they do very, very well. The paint on this is just nothing short of magnificent. I don't really see any color bleed, except for maybe the little stripes on his boots. That's about it. His buckle is clearly painted. The gold chain that holds the cape onto his shoulders are really well painted, and there's no slop onto the red tunic. The mask is well painted, and I really do love the textured paints added to his blonde hair, just to give it a little bit of highlights and really make the look of the figure pop. Articulation is the only thing that's lacking. He has the swivel head, he has a slight ball joint in his shoulders, but you can't make him do a standing pose. He will always have his arms slightly outward. He has the swivel elbows, which, because of the loose fitting shirt, when you put him in any pose, it just comes out looking awkward. A nice little swivel on the wrist would have done nice, but what are you gonna do? And then, of course, there is his legs. Now, this is something that does actually bother me. For the longest time, DC Direct started using these little T-crotches. That's what I call them. I have no idea what the industry called them. But they really did limit your posing with the legs. Now, for Alan Scott, it doesn't really bother me because the cape is a very stiff PVC plastic, so you wouldn't be able to make any pose if you so choose. So that really can't affect the figure, but it really can limit any other type of pose that you can do with them. He also has the bendable knees, and he's got not a rocker, but just a swivel ankle joint. And once again, it's kind of useless because it's very limited into the poses that you can do with it. Because of the cape hindering the posability, you can only slightly hold him out like so. And even then you have to have some sort of display base, or else he's just going to fall. But you can make a slightly cool, like about ready to take off or descent type of pose. And that's really all that you can do with him. Since these were collector figures back in the early 2000s, you really cannot fault them for this. DC Direct was mainly just props, replicas, statues. This was very early foray into action figures, and you could definitely see that they're trying to get their fitting. And I think had these been produced in the 90s, they will be well regarded as just really cool sculpted action figures. But this was the early 2000s. Marvel Legends just came out. Captain America, Iron Man, all of these other great figures were coming out. They had really intricate sculpts and articulation. These guys kind of get lost in the shuffle. You have people like me that regard these as really cool classics of a forgotten era, and then you have other people that are just completely shunning these in favor of the new DC Direct, or DC Collectibles. He does come with two really cool accessories. One of them is his power battery. Now, this would later be revealed as the Starheart. This was actually a glowing piece of meteorite that was fashioned by ancient Chinese into a lantern. And that's exactly what this thing looks like. This thing looks like one of those really cool old railroad lanterns. Now, when it saved the life of Alan Scott, it told him to fashion a ring so he could harness the power of Alan Scott. And basically what he did was to take a piece, carve a piece out of the lantern itself. So somewhere on this piece, he took a piece of the rock out and then fashioned this little ring. Now, I gotta say, Alan Scott was very cool, very intricate with details. This looks like really cool. And what I loved about these early DC Direct offerings is they gave you power rings that you can wear. You actually could wear this. So, and I say it does look pretty snazzy yourself. So a lot of people love getting these. They love wearing these in cosplay. And it was just a really cool little added touch to really get you to sell these figures. And since Alan Scott does have a slightly open hand, he can hold his lantern. And so that is Alan Scott. Now I have to say, there have only been 2 Alan Scott figures, 3 actually, produced using the Golden Age motif. You have, or maybe there was 4. You have the JSA version sculpted using the artwork of Alex Ross. You have the first appearance collection, which is iconic figures, iconic characters sculpted in their in the very theme of their very first appearance. So you have first appearance Batman looks like Bob Kane. Drew him in Detective number 27. First appearance Flash from Flash Comics number 1, etc., etc. And then there is this one. There may have been another one for another Justice Society theme, but I cannot say off the top of my head. These figures used to command into like the $80 range. But now I think with the new DC collectibles, these things have gone a little off. They're a little off in popularity right now, so you could probably find one for like 20, maybe even $40. He is a really cool figure, and I really do like him. But like I said, he really hasn't aged all that well with the modern, uber-articulated, figures that most collectors desire right now. But I say, if you really love the Golden Age Green Lantern, you might want to pick him up. You can still find him relatively cheap, and who knows how long it will be before he becomes a desired collectible again. This is Translator 10, and I am signing off.